Anne's News Video, January 2026. Welcome to the January edition of Anne's News Video, with interesting news from the Salesian world. RMG. RMG, Salesian Family Spirituality Days 2026. From January 15th to 18th, the 44th Salesian Family Spirituality Days united 350 participants in Valdocco and thousands online. Guided by the Rector Major's strenna, "Do whatever he tells you," the global family engaged in prayer and discernment. The four-day program included liturgical celebrations, conferences, guided visits to significant Salesian sites in Turin, testimonies, and moments of family communion. RMG. The Rector Major in dialogue with the young people of the SIM. On January 28th, the Basilica of the Sacred Heart in Rome hosted a vibrant dialogue between Rector Major Father Fabio Attard and the Salesian Youth Movement as a spiritual preparation for the feast of Don Bosco. Moderated by journalist Benedetta Rinaldi, the event fostered a spirit of listening and shared Salesian charism. Central and Western Africa. Democratic Republic of Congo, Salesian family reflects on 2026 strenna in Lubumbashi. The Salesian family of the Central Africa province gathered on January 4th, 2026 in Lubumbashi to reflect on the Rector Major's 2026 strenna, "Do whatever he tells you." The leaders of the province joined the celebration, strengthening fraternal bonds and spiritual communion as they entered the new year together. OGO, Visit of the Apostolic Nuncio. On 23rd January, the Don Bosco Higher Institute in Lomé welcomed the Apostolic Nuncio to Benin and Togo, Archbishop Ruben Dario Ruiz Mainardi, during his pastoral visit to the country. Addressing the students, he encouraged them to become authentic witnesses of Christ in today's fluid world. He also met with staff, highlighting the Church's commitment to quality education, and concluded the visit with a Eucharistic celebration. DR Congo, Prayer for World Peace. On January 11th, 2026, in Lubumbashi, 500 children and young adults from the Pueri Cantores movement gathered to pray for world peace. During a solemn mass and concert, they specifically petitioned for an end to conflict in eastern DR Congo. Guided by Father Nyunda Pascal, these young singers used sacred music to champion unity and global harmony. Eastern and Southern Africa. Ethiopia. Salesian Family Day in the AET Vice Province. On January 24th, 2026, the Salesian family of Ethiopia gathered in Addis Ababa to celebrate their shared mission. Representing 6 different groups, participants reflected on the theme, "Embodying Salesian Spirituality." Through prayer, music, and key addresses, the Assembly renewed its commitment to a culture of solidarity and faithful service to the young. Tanzania. Salesian Family Day at Morogoro. In Morogoro, Tanzania, the Salesian family gathered on January 11th to celebrate their annual Family Day. Hosted by the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians, more than 100 participants explored the 2026 Strenna through prayer and reflection. South Sudan. Football tournament in honor of Don Bosco. In Gumbo, South Sudan, the Salesian community concluded a month-long football tournament on February 15th. Gathering 13 teams and over 1,000 spectators, the event used sports to promote peaceful coexistence and unity. The Mary Help of Christians team emerged as champions, celebrating the spirit of Don Bosco. America South Cone. Brazil, 27th General Congress of the CJC movement. In Recife, Brazil, the Community of Young Christians movement held its 27th General Congress from January 9th to 11th. Celebrating its 60th anniversary, the gathering united delegations from 4 states to discern the movement's future. The Congress concluded with formative reflections and the election of a new General Council. Argentina. Formation experience for young people from the SIM. In Misiones, Argentina, the Saltimbanqui formation experience brought together 100 young leaders from January 4th to 9th. Part of the Verano Salesiano program, the event featured workshops on the preventive system and leadership. Through prayer and fraternal activities, participants deepened their commitment to the Salesian charism and youth ministry. Argentina. Patio Bosco, a decade on the streets of Corrientes. In Corrientes, Argentina, the 10th edition of Patio Bosco took place from January 22nd to 31st. Over 110 volunteers and animators served in 6 oratories, providing educational activities and catechesis for local children. This anniversary edition celebrated a decade of mission, bringing the joy of the Salesian charism to the streets. Brazil. Youth Congress 2026. In Manaus, Brazil, the 2026 Youth Congress gathered 120 young people on January 18th. Participants explored the lives of young saints, discovering that holiness is attainable today through moments of prayer, adoration, and workshops, inspiring youth to transform the world through faith and God's love. Chile. Provincial Missionary Volunteer Service. In Santiago, Chile, young adults aged 18 to 29 participated in Provincial Missionary Volunteer Service meeting that started on the 19th and concluded on the 31st of January, the feast of Don Bosco. The provincial father, Nelson Moreno, led the sending forth Mass, launching 2 weeks of community service and prayer. East Asia, Oceania. Vietnam. Spring Fair 2026. In Vietnam, Don Bosco communities, hosted the Spring Fair 2026 to celebrate the new year. Thousands of children across various regions enjoyed games, traditional festivals, and the Eucharist. The Spring Fair fostered faith, teamwork, and environmental awareness, embodying the Salesian mission to make every child feel truly loved. Japan. Himonia Salesian Alumni Gathering. In Tokyo, Japan, the Himonia Salesian Church hosted an alumni gathering on January 10th to honor 100 years of Salesian mission. Over 100 participants shared memories and celebrated through the Eucharist. Thailand. Salesian Family Spirituality Days. In Bangkok, Thailand, over 150 members of the Salesian family gathered on January 24th for the Spirituality Days, with focus on the 2026 Strenna and a Thanksgiving Mass. Philippines. Golden Jubilee celebrations of DBFC, Lawan. In Lawan, Philippines, the Don Bosco Formation Center celebrated its Golden Jubilee, marking 50 years of mission. The festivities included an alumni homecoming and a solemn mass led by Salesian leaders. South Asia. India. Platinum Jubilee celebration of the retreat. The Salesian province of Trichy celebrated the Platinum Jubilee of its post-novitiate house, the retreat at Yercaud, on January 10th, marking 75 years of formation. The event featured a solemn mass presided by the General Councillor of Formation, cultural programs, and a sports tournament. India. Zoe Youth Bible Convention. In Kolkata, India, over 1,200 young people gathered for the Zoe Youth Bible Convention from January 16th to 18th. Marking the Salesian centenary, the event featured worship, catechesis, and powerful testimonies, inspiring the participants to deepen their faith and become vibrant witnesses of the gospel. India. Faith Fiesta. Deepagam, the catechetical department of the province of Chennai, hosted Faith Fiesta 2026 at St. Bede's on January 30th, drawing 1,000 children and the participation of eminent dignitaries. The event featured faith sharing, cultural competitions, and the launch of Friends of Jesus and Salt and Light clubs. India. Salesian Family Day 2026. The members of the Salesian family in the province of Mumbai gathered on January 25th to celebrate Salesian Family Day, exploring the 2026 Strenna and key outcomes from the GC29. The day featured the Eucharist, presentations, and community games, fostering faith and brotherhood. Inter-America. Dominican Republic, National Assembly of Salesian Cooperators. In Santo Domingo, the Salesian Cooperators of the Dominican Republic held their National Assembly, during which the members gathered to strengthen communion and reflect on their mission. The Assembly focused on renewing their commitment to serving the Church and society. Panama, Salesian Youth Festival. In Panama City, youth gathered at the Don Bosco Basilica for the 2026 Salesian Youth Festival on January 17th to 18th. The festival featured museum visits, educational talks, and Sunday of Hope discussions. Through games and the Eucharist, participants deepened their faith and celebrated the Salesian spirit. Venezuela. Celebration of St. Francis de Sales in Caracas. In Caracas, Venezuela, the Salesian family honored St. Francis de Sales on January 24th. Processions and masses led by Archbishop Raúl Biord and Provincial Father Rafael Montenegro emphasized the saint's message of meekness. Ecuador. 130th anniversary of the Don Bosco School in La Tola. In Quito, Ecuador, the Don Bosco School in La Tola celebrated its 130th anniversary on January 26th. The Mother House tribute united students and families to honor its legacy of faith and renew their commitment to Salesian education. Central and Northern Europe. Poland, Three Kings Parade 2026. In Krakow, Poland, Salesians and missionary volunteers joined the 16th Three Kings Parade on January 6th. Under the motto, "Rejoice in Hope," the event raised funds for a housing project by Opera di Soccorso di San Padre Pio. Russia, the Wandering Oratory in Gatchina. In Gatchina, Russia, the Wandering Oratory held its youth winter camp from January 3rd to 7th. 15 leaders and 37 children enjoyed games, music, and a performance of The Unchangeable Ruble in rented premises. Slovenia, Salesian Animator Formation Program. In Verge, Slovenia, over 130 young people gathered from January 9th to 11th for Salesian Animator Formation. Organized by the province youth ministry sector, the weekend focused on Don Bosco's educational system, leadership skills, and spiritual deepening. Poland, 30th National Salesian Youth Futsal Games. In Suwałki, Poland, the 30th National Salesian Youth Futsal Games took place from January 23rd to 25th. Young athletes from 12 Salos associations competed, blending sports with spiritual growth, friendship, and Salesian educational values. Mediterranean. Italy. Sim Formation Course. In Naples and Gallipoli, Italy, 110 young leaders from Southern Salesian and FMA oratories attended a Salesian Youth Movement Formation course from January 2nd to 4th. The program combined workshops and faith to strengthen their responsibility in Salesian service. Italy, concluding celebrations of 100 years in San Cataldo. In San Cataldo, Italy, the Rector Major Father Fabio Attard concluded the centenary of Salesian presence from January 10th to 11th, during which he received honorary citizenship and inaugurated a new Don Bosco monument. Tunisia, Day of Peace at the Ibn el-Jazar School. In Manouba, Tunisia, students at Ibn el-Jazar School celebrated a Day of Peace on January 9th. Through theatre, music and song, the school community promoted tolerance and empathy, aiming to transform abstract peace into everyday actions for future responsible citizens. Lebanon, Strenna Presentation 2026. In Fidar, Lebanon, numerous communities and groups of the Salesian family gathered on January 18th to reflect on the 2026 Strenna. The provincial father, Simon Zakarian, urged the participants to live a conscious faith and offer generous service to young people who currently lack the wine of hope. Spain, Traveling Triduum of Don Bosco. In Córdoba, Spain, the Salesian family celebrated a traveling Triduum for the 125th anniversary of its local house. Don Bosco's image processed through 3 city parishes, uniting the community in prayer and gratitude before arriving at the shrine of Mary Help of Christians for his feast. Italy, a tribute to Vera Grita in the Sacred Heart Basilica, Rome. On the 29th of January, the Sacred Heart Basilica in Rome hosted the theatrical dance performance Sacri Cuori Viventi, honoring the servant of God, Vera Grita. This tribute featured 7 virtues embodied by dancers and a week-long biographical exhibition celebrating Grita's spiritual legacy and her Living Tabernacles message. Don Bosco Feast. The Feast of Don Bosco was celebrated worldwide with great joy and enthusiasm by the young people in Salesian family. Let's take a glance at some of the celebrations. In Turin, Italy, at Valdocco, along with the other preparations, the Feast of Don Bosco was celebrated with Vespers and a youth mass led by Rector Major Father Fabio Attard, the prayer vigil, and the other liturgical festivities with the participation of local bishops and young people. In Spain, the Salesian family celebrated with sports, theatre, and religious events involving students, educators, and beneficiaries. In Port Vila, Vanuatu, the first ever Feast of Don Bosco brought parishioners together for a novena and veneration of relics, inspiring several adults to begin formation as Salesian cooperators. In Jerusalem, at the Ratisbon Institute, the Salesian community celebrated the feast with a mass presided over by Bishop Bruno Variano, who also blessed the renovated chapel as a sign of hope.
In Ayyanavaram, Chennai, India,
At the Don Bosco Shrine, the 9 solemn days of the novena concluded with a large and well-attended car procession with the statue of Don Bosco being solemnly carried through the streets of the neighborhood. In Shillong, India, the Salesian family gathered at Don Bosco Technical School to celebrate the feast of St. John Bosco with the provincial, priests, novices, youth, and collaborators. In Manouba, Tunisia, the Salesian family celebrated the feast with a solemn mass presided over by Archbishop Nicolas Lernould, attended by diplomats and highlighting Don Bosco's universal legacy. In Adwa, Ethiopia, on the feast day, more than 1,100 participants joined a 5-kilometer Race for Peace, organized with the FMA, concluding with the Don Bosco Cup Awards. In Bogota, Colombia, at the National Shrine of Our Lady of Carmen, the feast featured a mass, a relic display, and performances by the Valdoco Symphonic Band and youth. In Krakow, Poland, at the Salesian Seminary, the celebration included a solemn mass, a fraternal agape, community games, and the traditional Good Night by the provincial. In Warsaw, Poland, at the Salesian Missionary Center, the feast was marked by a solemn mass, missionary bingo, sharing sessions, and adoration with volunteers and missionaries. In Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, at the Don Bosco Technical School in Gabutu, the academic year opened with the feast celebration in the presence of the provincial. In Etobicoke, Toronto, Canada, at St. Benedict's Parish, the feast was celebrated during weekend masses, with Salesian cooperators renewing their promises, followed by a fraternal lunch and Strenna video presentation. In Lomé, Togo, at Maria Auxiliadora Parish, the feast coincided with the parish's 35th anniversary and included youth adoration, a drama titled Don Bosco Café, and a solemn mass. In Cayes and Thorland, Haiti, the feast launched the celebrations of 90 years of Salesian presence, with a solemn mass attended by hundreds and Festi Bosco, featuring games and cultural performances. In Cuiabá, Brazil, at São Gonçalo Parish, the feast was marked by the launch of the Don Bosco Award for Salesian Witness to honor those living Salesian values. In Syros, Greece, the first public celebration of Don Bosco's feast was held with a solemn mass presided over by Bishop Sebastianus and the participation of the new international Salesian community. In Liverpool, Great Britain, at St. John Bosco Arts College, students and staff honored their patron saint with a school-wide mass and value-centered activities. In Ljubljana, Slovenia, students of the St. Francis de Sales Institute in Zelimlje made their traditional pilgrimage to the Shrine of Mary Help of Christians in Ljubljana, where they joined past pupils and members of the Salesian family for the solemn celebration of the Feast of St. John Bosco. In Moscow, Russia, the Salesian House celebrated with a solemn mass attended by diplomatic representatives and a theatrical performance marking its 30-year mission. In Muhazi, Rwanda, the feast featured a solemn Eucharistic celebration with student sacraments and the graduation of TVET students. In Hamamatsu, Japan, the Brazilian community celebrated the feast and the Salesian centenary with a mass and youth presentations on Don Bosco and Don Cimati. In Montevideo, Uruguay, the Salesian family celebrated Don Bosco with acrobats, Eucharist, music and youth festivities, launching the 150th anniversary of Salesian presence under the theme A Flamboyant Story. That's all we have for you in this January edition of Anne's News video. Please do share it with all your confrères, beneficiaries and collaborators, and make known the good done in the name of Don Bosco.